Good day. Welcome to the TAMS Travel and Meeting Society's first Data Committee webinar. What you need to know about traveler mobile numbers. This conversation is brought to you by Grasp Technologies, Travel Data Management and Analytics. We help you transform data into intelligence. The Travel and Meeting Society, aka TAMS, a collaborative, grassroots, independent society of business travel industry professionals designated to drive the business travel and meeting and event industry forward through collaboration and networking. And the TAMS Data Committee, where we are creating a centralized conversation on travel industry data that aims to evolve the latency, accuracy, and breadth of data across the travel industry. Doing things like campaigning LinkedIn to add business traveling events as an industry option, jamboarding travel data problems such as hotel name normalization, and sparking conversation about traveler mobile numbers, which is why we are here today. I am your host, Andrew Slaby, a senior travel manager at Raytheon Technologies and lead of the TAMS Data Committee. This session will be recorded and will be available later today. I also want to encourage all participants to use the Q&A section of the Zoom. Fun fact about myself, I have a 4-month-old who you may hear in the background. And now let's welcome the perspective of our 4 experts joining us here today. First, our travel security expert, a veteran of 30 years with the U.S. Army, a former K-9 handler in narcotics, a former member of the U.S. Secret Service, now head of traveler security at Pratt & Whitney, from my home county of Litchfield, and owner of 2 mules, Rod Rose.
Thank you, Andrew. Morning, all. Great introduction. I thought you wrote that yourself.
You assisted in writing, so thank you, Rod.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Really interesting, and maybe we'll get back to that later today.
Yes, that would be great. Cell phones in travel industry has come a long ways in the past 40 years. When I first started traveling as an adult through the military, you were handed a piece of paper, put on an airplane, and just followed directions with people there. Now with cell phones in technology, as far as it's come in the last 40 years, information is instantaneous. So now in the corporate world, it's a duty of care priority for all corporations across the world to have that connectivity with their traveler so they can be in constant contact in case there's an event that may lead to accountability or just general information. If you become ill while you're on the road, you can get word back to your company and or family in a timely manner. Or if something happens and the company sees it while you're in a board meeting or whatever the case may be, they can let you know that something's happening in your immediate area and that you may take the necessary precautions to keep yourself safe.
Great, Rod. We'll come back and thank you. We're looking forward to the conversation, Rod. Next, we have our expert in all aspects of the Global Travel Program. She is an active member of the Global Business Travel Association, GBTA, sits on several airline and hotel advisory boards, devoted TAMS Data Committee member, successfully implemented mobile numbers across her company, Lazard, a financial company operating globally in 25 countries. Please welcome Martha Ferguson.
Thank you, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining us today, Martha. We're looking forward to learning more about your expertise in mobile numbers and how you were successful in getting a high adoption at Lazard. Next is our brilliant expert on data privacy. He holds a Master of Laws, a Master's of Research, a PhD in Philosophy and Security and Crime Science from the University College London, a former data protection officer, and now the Global Group Chief Privacy Officer for Flight Center Travel Group. Joining us from across the pond in the great city of London, Dr. Timothy Michener-Nyssen.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everybody. Great to be talking with everyone today as we discuss the really interesting topic of mobile phones within corporate travel.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Tim. And finally, we have our data expert, a leading expert in the field of travel technology, and his team at Grasp have created countless solutions for travel agencies worldwide. He is responsible for the first automated graphic reporting system for the travel industry, a foremost expert on data consolidation and visualization, a board member of the San Diego Business Travel Association, a frequent blogger, president and CEO of our sponsor, Grasp Technologies, from the Sunshine State of Florida. Mueller.
Thanks, Andrew. Obviously mobile numbers is an important data point in the whole reconciliation consolidation process that occurs within the travel space. It's one of those nice, consistent things we can grab onto. So looking forward to talking about it.
Great. Thanks for joining us today, Eric. Really appreciate everything that you do on the data committee and for Grasp for sponsoring this webinar. So thank you. So with that, we'll get away from the script now and get more towards just a free flow conversation. And I'm going to start off with Rod and really just talk about, the value of traveler mobile numbers from his perspective within traveler security. So Rod, hopefully we won't hear your two mules in the background while you address this. But please tell us about your experience with traveler mobile numbers. What have you learned about traveler mobile numbers, their importance, especially in the wake of COVID, and your perspective?
Thanks, Andrew. I've been with two corporations over the last few years, and I have come to learn that cell numbers are of great importance for a number of reasons. We have people traveling all around the world, and there's a number of events that take place on a daily basis that impact our travelers. The Caribbean area is prone to a lot of hurricanes. So for the duty of care, we normally reach out to our employees and travelers within a certain area and notify them, hey, look, take the necessary preparations, a storm's coming your way. And once the storm passes, then it's a duty of care for accountability. The corporation wants to know that all their employees are safe, their facilities are safe. So it's important to be in touch with the facility manager. And if it's a cell phone or a satellite cell, it's greatly important. I have found in some instances where a lot of employees think that Big Brother is watching and that they do not want to provide that necessary information. So what has happened in the past, 80% of the employees are notified that the storm is coming. And then afterwards, that same 80% will be accounted for. And then the other 20% that haven't responded back in some way, whether it's a phone call, email, or whatever, now I have to go and start finding ways to track these people down, either through other employees, go through back to HR to try to find out if there's any other phone numbers listed for them, a home number. But you know as well as I do that a lot of the landlines are down. Some in Puerto Rico a couple of years ago, a lot of the cell towers were down. So we had to have people go out door to door to account for people and to check on the statuses of their families. So it's come a long ways. in the corporation's duty of care is taking on new roles and responsibilities and actually help create some new jobs and positions in security. And with this cell phone data, it requires a team to try to get the word out to the employee of its importance between legal, HR, and the technology side of it, along with security. So with those groups formed inside your corporation, you can make an effective program.
And Rod, there are multiple ways to contact employees today, whether it's email or mobile numbers. What is your experience in terms of efficiency and response time? Which way is really the most preferred way to communicate?
All, if you can. A lot of corporations have an emergency alert system that incorporates text, emails, and phone calls that can be all done simultaneously. That is probably the most effective way. I had a tsunami warning in Indonesia a few years back. Out of the 74 employees that were there, all of them had their email address listed in HR, which was fed into our emergency notification system. So I had to wait. This is a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which was early in the morning over there. So I had to wait until Monday to start making phone calls to ensure that all of our employees were safe. Thankfully, there was no tsunami. It was just a warning and nothing was found. But we discovered a flaw in our system that the local managers were not encouraging cell phones to be put in there. So nobody was notified until they came to the office on the following week.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I hear you. I think that all ways of communication are certainly preferred. The more information that we have within our traveler profiles. What is your experience in terms of traveler profiles that actually have mobile numbers? In the wake of COVID, what was that experience like with employees that maybe didn't have those mobile numbers? How much more time did it take you to finalize your counting of folks and where they were from a travel perspective?
From the COVID side, we our travel down extensively. It only had to be on a need basis, or it had to require a specific need, whether it was an investigation or it had to be a critical incident for our people to travel. So in those numbers, probably 80 to 90% of our folks have a cell number in their travel profile. Now we changed our approving methods. So with those methods, this way we had contact with all of our travelers and to try to get them to update their personal information. Now with us opening up our technology, we're sending out a communications corporate wide to update your personal information, because if you don't, credit card information is wrong, your cell number is wrong. Now with everybody being remote, your desk phone number is not your number one primary phone that you use your cell phone. So that's been the trend here lately that I've been seeing.
Interesting. And maybe if you want to talk a little bit to those travelers that didn't have mobile numbers, what was that experience like for you as a travel security manager, those that didn't have mobile numbers in their profile? Did it take an extra effort to contact them, or did you find that email was sufficient?
Email was sufficient, because now with cell phones tied in with your email account, that's a secondary means. I try to do the email first and then I follow up with a phone call. Sometimes they respond back, and that if I have 10 people that I need to notify of an incident, I'll send out an email, and 9 times out of 10, I'll get 8 responses back by email. So that cuts down my phone time just to 2 phone calls for the incident. So that's kind of my approach to it at this point in time. With COVID, those numbers are way down, so I can actually reach out to an individual a lot easier than the numbers that we had traveling a year ago.
Right. Well, certainly with the lower volume in travelers, it does make your job easier to contact them. But I know you are reaching out to all these travelers. And we've talked in the past that, you know, the time it took to contact some travelers was really excessive at times because you didn't have a direct mobile number. They weren't responding by email. You know, what was that like?
I had to become creative in a lot of times these folks don't travel alone. It's usually in a small group. So I would have to reach out to another coworker to knock on somebody's door to, hey, are you here? Are you okay? That's kind of been far and few between, but that has happened.
Right, right. Well, it certainly makes sense. You know, from a duty of care perspective, travel risk management, the liability that a corporation has, it's very important that we can contact our employees as efficiently as possible. You know, and certainly that mobile number provides a lot more flexibility in terms of how we communicate. You know, and speaking as a travel manager, you know, the way we are able to leverage our third party communication, SMS, to reach those travelers and, you know, get their feedback to assure they're safe. And I know that you as a travel security manager, that's obviously your number one priority. And so it's important that you have those mobile numbers so that you can be effective in your job and not take an excessive amount of time reaching folks. So all really great things. And which really gets to the next part of the conversation, which is trying to understand what are the best practices in gathering mobile numbers and getting folks, encouraging folks to input their traveler mobile numbers in their travel profiles. Martha, you have a lot of experience with this. At Lazard, you have some really great success in getting your employees to include their mobile numbers in their profiles. What has Lazard done that has allowed you to be so successful with collecting mobile numbers?
So thank you, Andrew. Great question. I think it's been easy for me in that I've got a lot of support from my HR department. So where it starts for us is within each employee's HR profile. And they're very strict about that because we work with a messaging software system called Send Word Now. And much to what Rod was addressing, that notification, mass notification for critical alerts, and it goes not only to our cell phones via voice, it goes to a text message, and we also get it in an email. So because that process is so important for us, everybody's cell phone number is automatically in the HR profile. So what we did is we've linked that to the HR feed that goes into Concur, to our travel booking system. So that means that everybody's cell phone automatically goes into their travel profile. If for some reason there's a cell phone missing from HR, which is rare, but it does happen, if that's missing, then it's blank in the travel profile. So especially with new hires, when they join the firm and they set up their travel profile, the cell phone field is mandatory. So they cannot save their profile without putting a cell phone number in there. So that's where we have such a high success. We're well over 95% success rate with the mobile phones. And in the small cases where it might be missing, then I just reach out to somebody. We do an annual survey and a reminder, and that comes from HR. It doesn't come from me, reminding people that they need to look at their HR profile and make sure that it's updated and everything is filled out as needed. And we remind them of the need to be able to reach them. Now, I mean, to me, that seems like a no-brainer because my job is to make sure that our travelers are safe and they get from point A to point B safely. They understand that we need to be able to reach them. My travel management company might need to be able to reach them in case there's a schedule change or something urgent, or, I've even had hotels and airlines reach out directly. So it's critical that this number be in somebody's profile. I struggle to understand who doesn't find that comfortable, because we live in a world where we share our cell phone numbers with everybody. Somebody that you meet on the street that you might want to connect with later. Oh, let's exchange cell phone numbers. It's as simple as that. So that's helped us a lot. The annual review. The other thing that I'm fortunate, the culture at Lazard is that most of the travel profiles are maintained by our executive assistants. So on top of the annual reminder from HR, I do the same thing with the executive assistants and make sure that they go into all of their travelers' profiles and make sure that that cell phone number is in there. And it's worked quite well.
That's excellent. And that's really to be applauded, to have over 90% adoption of those mobile numbers, so you can really extract that value from a communication perspective. Raytheon Technologies, I'll tell you, we haven't been as successful. I recently I pulled a report, and let me encourage all the folks that are on the phone today that this is something you all can do, is ask your travel agency, what percentage of your traveler profiles include a mobile number? And when we pulled that report, what we found across the organization is that we had only about 25% of traveler profiles included a mobile number, which is very low, especially when you're comparing it to Lazard. And, I think that there's many reasons for that. And, and I think it has to do with the culture of the company, and also the way that the company hierarchy is structured, where, not everybody within Raytheon necessarily has an assistant, and not everybody is traveling either on a regular basis. And I look at and think about our program, and I'm trying to think of ways in which we can encourage it. And I know in prior conversation, one communication tool that we've talked about is, just leveraging the online booking tool with messaging early on, so as folks are booking their travel, to have a pop-up message that tells them about the benefits of including their mobile number, why it's a good idea. But we do find it difficult, I will say, Martha, to, we can't force folks to put in their mobile number on our side. And actually, you guys have an interesting program, because you have actually a bring your own device policy at Lazard. And so I'm wondering, were you able to, in your employee contracts or something up front with the employees, let them know hey, if you want to travel, this is a requirement and you have to provide consent to provide that mobile number? Is there anything up front that Lazard is doing, to make it clear to employees that they want to travel, they need to provide that mobile number?
I mean, during onboarding for new employees, we certainly stress that this information is needed. I personally basically say to people, we need to be able to reach you if something happens. And I don't relate this to COVID, because look, there were risks involved with travel way before the pandemic. So it's not, and obviously this is much worse, but of course with the pandemic, people are traveling less. So it's the moot point there. It's really strict. It's simply educating our employees as to why it's so important that we be able to reach them. And again, because I've got the support of our HR system where it's required, then it makes my job a little bit easier. And you're right, we are a 100% bring your own device. Lazard doesn't provide any mobile devices, laptops, anything. It's all done on our own. So they, to a degree, yes, you could say that we can't force people to provide the number, but again, it's about educating them on the value of us having that number and what can go wrong if we can't reach them. And it's worked. I think you just appeal to their sense of their common sense, and they're just allowing them to understand why it's so critical.
Totally. And as Rod and I were talking earlier, just about how it just makes things much more efficient, especially as a head of traveler security, the efficiency that having that mobile number brings. And there are so many tools out there as well that facilitate the mobile number, and it's not just necessarily the travel agency where you can leverage that mobile number for communication, any other kind of mobile application that you have, in order to get your itineraries. It's not even always about duty of care. It's also about making sure that employees are getting the best information to them as soon as possible. Like, giving your mobile number allows a travel agency to, text you itinerary information and updates, so that if your flight changes or your hotel accommodations, there's an adjustment or car rental, that you get those updates, real time. And it really can really aid that traveler. So even beyond that traveler security value. And so, Martha, I think you guys are doing a great job. But I still, from a Raytheon technology perspective and many other companies out there, I think we do struggle to some degree with trying to, and I think you're right, it's about educating travelers on why to submit their mobile numbers. But ultimately, there are data privacy concerns around mobile numbers. And Dr. Tim, you're an expert in data privacy, and we've had some good conversation recently on mobile numbers. Can you give us some guidance from a data privacy perspective on what we can and cannot do with mobile numbers? What are some of the limitations? And perhaps what are some really good practices that you've seen out there from a data privacy perspective to gather mobile numbers?
Yeah, no problem, Andrew. It's a very interesting area, and we have had good conversations on this on the past. It's the challenge and the starting point, I think, for most organizations, and especially multinationals, is that there is no one global privacy law that we can all refer to. And over the past 10 years, and certainly given a bit of a kick by GDPR, has just been a proliferation of privacy laws. So when I'm reporting to the board these days, I kind of say, just equate it to taxes. You expect there, to be taxes in the country you're working in. You should just expect that there will be some form of privacy legislation in most of the countries you're working in as well. So it's just something that you need to bear in mind when you are considering, how you are processing data on your employees. So because there's not one universal law, we kind of fall back on what are called sort of basic principles of processing data. And we examine those to say, well, how can we justify the asking individuals to provide us with their mobile phones? And there's a couple of key ones here. One is the concept of data minimization, which is the idea that you really should only be storing what is necessary from a PII perspective. You're only storing and processing the personal data that's necessary for the purpose that you're trying to achieve. So that's very much a key one. And another one is that you're processing data in a fair and transparent manner. So kind of focusing on those two quite quickly, it's when you consider mobile phones within travel, it's if ever there was a data point that lends itself to all of the requirements around looking after an individual as part of their job, it's got to be mobile phone and traveling. I mean, for starters, it's in the name, right? It's in the tin, like mobile phones. They're designed to be used by people who are mobile and are, flying interstate, flying, internationally. That is actually often a better data point than trying to rely upon an email address, because they're not always checking your emails, whereas you'll perhaps more likely be able to, when you're traveling, have your phone on you and recognize that it's ringing at that time because someone like Rod is calling you because an incident has occurred. And the other ones is the types and the reasons why we contact a person while traveling also fit very well into this data minimization and this idea for why we would collect it. So it's a couple of things. It's the duty of care that I think Martha and Rod have already very much touched on, that idea that there are many reasons, not just COVID, there's many reasons why you want to be able to contact your employees to say, you know, there is an incident or something happening in the country they're traveling to or where you think they are and you want to make sure they're safe, but also so that the employee can also contact you as their employer and say, I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, something's gone wrong and I need help. So often the person they'll be calling will be the employer looking for them to do something to get them out of a situation. So you want to have that number to facilitate that two-way communication. On other areas where it taps into is things like, certainly within Europe, we have what's called the Payment Services Directive 2 or PSD2, around actually trying to remove the need to store credit cards, certainly from the travel agent's perspective, where we use like strong customer authentication and use tokenization, where you will use your mobile phone to provide to a payment service provider, someone like CyberSource, so that we're not actually storing your credit card to reduce the propensity for fraud within the travel industry as a whole. You provide it directly to the PSP, they send us a token, and then you'll do your bookings using that token and you use your mobile phone to confirm those transactions. It's a great way of actually increasing security by removing the number of organizations touching credit cards. And then there's things like IATA 830D, which is the IATA rule around providing either a mobile phone or an email address to be able to at least start asking to provide it to an airline so that in the event of, you know, schedule changes, gate changes, the airline can contact the individual and say, hey, you're on the other side of the airport now, or your flight's been delayed by 2 hours, things like that. All of which, when you think about it, segue perfectly into the whole idea of why we want your mobile phone to facilitate international travel. So those are lots of reasons why you can justify it. The challenge, and I think where the privacy comes in, has been around another principle called purpose limitation, whereby, you know, you're collecting this information for specific purposes. And it's always the thing, I guess, is the challenge I call out both internally within the Flight Centre Travel Group, but also with clients, of a function creep idea that, well, we've got this data point being the mobile phone. Can't we just use it for lots of other really cool things too? And that's something that is, I would always caution both internally and externally that, you know, especially if it's a BYOD situation, that if someone has provided you their mobile phone number, they often get worried about, say, tracking or performance monitoring the individuals, basically, you know, putting an application onto the device and using it for purposes other than just that a contact mechanism with the person. Now, there may be a desire to do that within an organization, but the caution is that it removes the trust of the individual for them to want to provide their mobile number. So if they know it's limited to specific purposes and they trust the company that it's only going to be used in this way, it's much easier, I think, to encourage that, uptake from the individual to put it into their profile, but also to remove any lingering legal concerns around the storage of that data and how it's going to be used going forward.
Great, Dr. Tim. And let me just quickly plug in here to encourage folks to please, you know, use the Q&A section to ask any questions you may have. And there are a few that are filling in here, and we're going to get to those questions. Dr. Tim, you know, can you talk a little bit about the difference between that bring your own device atmosphere versus when a company provides you a mobile number, and kind of the rights from a data privacy perspective, and the difference between a company issued phone versus your own device, and, you know, how those mobile numbers may differ in terms of how they can be shared?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a bit of a developing area, I'd say, and it has been for a while, but it's certainly a lot easier from a risk perspective, or just even from a risk tolerance perspective from an organization to, and the HR departments, to very quickly justify including a company issued device number into a profile and a HR feed as one of the mandatory requirements that will go over with your TMC to, you know, to pass over to populate those profiles of the individual. I mean, it's certainly, it's, you know, it's a work device. We're putting in the same way we'll put in your work email. They're not exactly a data point that's going to raise a lot of controversy. The BYOD, and here's the point I go back to, it doesn't even cause a controversy because you can certainly justify it from a GDPR perspective and from other privacy regimes perspectives as the organization having a legitimate interest in collecting that data. I think we've shown that from a number of the examples from the different panelists of legitimate interests. That's not where the challenge arises. It's more making sure you can sort of ring fence that piece of information or the device itself from uses that go beyond what you've told the individual employee you're going to use that data point for. So if you've made it clear as part of their work that, yes, performance monitoring or travel and location data is going to be collected from an app that's put on the phone, and that's part of the employment contract and was clear all along with the individual, that certainly reduces some of those privacy concerns and risks. Like I said, though, that's not really the challenge. You're still being very transparent with the individual at that point, which is great. The real risks come in, whereas if you think, well, I have an opportunity here to use it for other non-related purposes, and I'm just not going to tell the individual about that, that's where you have a real risk of a breakdown in trust. And both a violation of certain privacy regimes as well. So that certainly serves, it may give you a short-term goal like to tick, but it certainly, I think, has a longer-term damage on that relationship and the willingness to share the information as part of a travel program.
Great, Dr. Tim. And I want to get over to Eric and pull on some of his expertise on from a technology perspective. But maybe, Dr. Tim, one last question that you have some knowledge on. Maybe it's a little bit of a wild card question, but are there any examples where somebody didn't take the right procedure and process in gathering mobile numbers? Like, is there penalties involved if one was to capture mobile numbers and kind of break those contracts, without, giving the employees a proper heads up that their mobile numbers are being used?
Absolutely. And certainly within GDPR mainly, or GDPR-like regimes, there's certainly that collection and the processing of data, which lacks the transparency requirement. So you've done it without, you needed a lawful basis to do so as the organization to begin with. If that's not there, you're already in breach of that legislation. But then even if you have a lawful basis so that you potentially could collect the mobile phone number, if you're not being transparent with the individuals themselves and you haven't gone about collecting the information the right way, or included in your privacy notices to explain what it is you're doing with it, then again, you're just going to be in violation of a different part of that legislation. So you, as an organization, you are opening yourself up certainly to fines or regulatory action, or just as bad sort of reputational damage with your employees, which is sometimes can be higher, or a higher damage than a monetary concern.
Yeah, certainly that's true. You need to keep the trust of your employees. Certainly, that's probably the most critical piece about making sure that you do your due diligence and assure that you're collecting that information the right way, is assuring the trust with your employees. And I'm sure that there's some hefty fines as well if you break that GDPR, those GDPR rules, which I'm not sure if we know how much those penalties could potentially be, but I'm sure they're pretty significant depending on what happens. Eric, I wanted to come over to you. You have such a great background in the travel industry, an understanding really of both data and technology. What are some good technology tools that you've seen to improve the consistency of mobile numbers in traveler profiles?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of profile sync tools out there that it puts the control of managing those things in the hands of the corporation and even in the travelers for maintaining that data. So that usually greatly improves data quality because it's got built-in checks and cleaning routines and things like that that are going to help improve that data quality and consistency across and everybody, especially global organizations, they're working with TMCs and GDSs in multiple countries. And in this profile sync kind of gives them a central way to manage it across all of those platforms. They may be using a booking tool, a GDS, even an agent, booking offline transactions and things like that, or manual transactions, I should say. So, there's a lot of touch points that occur, and something like a profile sync tool can help corral all that and bring some consistency across all the platforms, which I think is really powerful. And the stuff that Dr. Tim was talking about was the tokenization, I think, is going to be more and more prevalent because it's really the primary solution that I think as we move into the future. And there's always been a lot of talk about blockchain and that, but tokenization is going to allow for us to manage all that PII information the same way it's used for credit card numbers today. All of the traveler information eventually will need to be tokenized, and that's kind of the global solution, I think. And where the future's headed is just tokenize everything, make it easy. So data quality is always going to be an underlying issue as well, but those things are going to solve some of these problems. And we do the same thing in our, we update our employee agreements and our, standard practices. We just added a bring your own device policy to our employee handbooks this year. And it's got the rules, it's transparency, it lets the employees know how that's going to be managed and controlled. So I think just about every company is doing that or should be doing that at this point. So.
Great. Now, I think, when you travel, when you think about our mobile numbers, they can also be expensive when you travel internationally. What are some really good practices when traveling internationally in terms of trying to reduce our costs for our mobile numbers? If you're out internationally, is it best to be in roaming, or are there other approaches versus using that roaming feature?
Well, the great thing now is, you have Wi-Fi calling. So, and things have improved dramatically in the past 5 years as far as Wi-Fi availability. But when there's a crisis, a lot of times that's the first thing to go is cellular service. So, if you've got Wi-Fi calling turned on, that greatly reduces your costs, and it also improves your ability to connect when a lot of times the cell service isn't available and things like that. If you're remote, you're remote, but as long as you're near a hotel or a coffee shop, that's a way a lot of travelers kind of can do both at the same time. Plus now we're all using Teams, Zoom, it opens up this whole other platform of communication, real-time texting and sharing, whether it's Teams or Slack or whatever anybody uses. That's a great alternate form of communication. I'm using the phone considerably less than I ever did before. It's very rare to actually call someone now, especially internally.
Yeah, I find somebody that's been traveling now internationally for the last 12 years for business. It's really evolved in those 12 years where I would, first when traveling, it would be very expensive to contact family and friends. And now, I can over Wi-Fi use FaceTime with my family back at home, without any cost really. So it's really evolved quite a bit. And there's also great apps like WhatsApp, which allows you to also communicate pretty inexpensively, across the globe and internationally. So certainly really great other ways of communication, et cetera. Kind of coming back to, somebody like Rod and traveler security and assuring accountability, those mobile numbers are still very important, because in times of crisis, sending an SMS is certainly the quickest way to communicate. Folks don't always have access to their email, and that SMS messaging can be really critical in times of stress and anxiety and emergency situations. I think those are all great things. maybe just an open question for the panelists, are there other uses of mobile numbers that you've seen out there, or anything that you folks would like to add in the conversation regarding mobile numbers?
I mean, Andrew, I'll just throw out something. I think I think it, first of all, it's obviously the easiest way to get in touch with people, because we're all connected to our phones like probably we shouldn't be, but it's just the way of life. It's how we live, it's how we act. And I'm never without mine. And I know my employees are never without theirs. So it's the easiest way to get to them. The other way that I use their mobile phones is on within my duty of care program. I can go onto the traveler tracking map, because I think maybe Rod alluded to this. We've got a lot of people that travel in groups, and there's usually 4 or 5 people at a time. So if they're in an area where there's a critical event happening, or I need to get in touch with them, I can go on to my duty of care program, go onto the map, find everybody that's in London, and message them all at the same time. So it's, and I know that they're going to see that possibly quicker than they might see an email. And I don't want to call them in case they're in a meeting or they're not reachable. It just seems the obvious way to manage messaging between people these days.
Great. And I think that answers a question that we see here in the Q&A. I see from Susan, to you, Martha, do you prefer managing duty of care through the mobile numbers? Is that information more accurate when trying to locate a traveler? So I think you.
Yeah, I mean, it's as accurate as the number is correct. And again, with the support of my HR team and our HR profiles that are constantly being monitored for accuracy, I know that I'm going to reach them. And the other way that I can also find my people is that we also do the credit card swipe. So I know within my duty of care program where somebody used their credit card the last time, wherever they were. So it's all about the corporate responsibility that we have to our travelers, knowing that they're out there away from their families, traveling on behalf of our firm. And again, it's educating them on why we need to be able to reach them. And I think if you cater to that emotion, then it's much easier to get buy-in from the company. And to Dr. Tim's point, we certainly have that acceptance when they first create their profiles, or they have to agree that this information is being housed in their travel profile, so they know what they're getting.
Great. Here's a good comment here from Kevin. He says, and maybe this is going to go towards Dr. Tim, but please, everybody jump in. He says, some organizations make the inclusion of mobile numbers mandatory during the initial travel profile and/or HR emergency contact online setup process, and the profile cannot be set up without this field being completed. It's obvious what the benefits are in doing this, especially in today's world. It would be interesting in hearing thoughts on the disadvantages and why an organization would not require this.
Yeah, it's a very good question. The obvious disadvantage is if not everybody has a device. So while everybody in an organization will probably be issued a company email address, because that's very simple and virtually cost free to do. If you're onboarding somebody and if it's a BYOD, if somebody for some reason doesn't have a device and then they can't set up a profile and then they can't book their initial trips, that just causes friction within the travel program. Similarly, if the devices are provided by the organization and you're going to make it mandatory to have that device within your profile and expect people to travel, it does mean you're going to have to pay for a device for everybody and make sure that they receive it. Usually at the start, especially what they hit the ground from day one, sort of running, and I think we've all learned this while working remotely. Onboarding people remotely is an absolute pain. So you want to get everything so that they can actually start work from day one, which means having their devices in their hand even before they've actually commenced the work process. So that's certainly a challenge to whenever you place a barrier that someone can't jump over because of something that's sort of outside of their control, that just creates friction from day one.
Really good question here from Greg Ross. If your company reimburses you for using your personal cell phone, do they then gain some sense of ownership for requiring the cell number? So maybe a personal device, but your company is reimbursing you. Does that mean that they gain some ownership for requiring the cell phone number because they are paying your service?
I'd say that's from a privacy perspective, that's a pretty strong no, in that they don't gain ownership over you because they're paying you a wage. So if you extrapolate that, I'd say no. That's more a how many people would want to come and work for you if you weren't paying for their business telephone expenses would be the way to flip that one around. But I'll pass that to the other panelists.
Yeah, and I would disagree on that a little bit, because our policy, and I've seen it in a lot of companies, is if we're paying for the cell phone, then we also get the right to wipe the device. Now, this is partially for the employee's protection while traveling internationally if it's lost or stolen. But if we're paying for it, it's in lieu of providing them with a device, is essentially the way that a lot of companies look at it is, hey, we're covering the cost of this cell phone so that you don't have it. It's a benefit, but it also gives the company some rights of management of that device. Since from an IT perspective, at least, that's usually the attitude is, hey, we're going to secure the phone with encryption, and we're going to be able to remote wipe it in the case of theft. Typically, we don't monitor them unless it's tied to an app or something like that. We try and respect the privacy of the individual, but we do require some form of ownership if we are going to be covering that cost.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Eric, and I think that's where you get down to those real distinctions on the ownership. I totally agree when it comes to we do it the same way, that ability to remote wipe the devices, but usually we'll have the apps segmented in the phone itself within sort of a wallet of work apps, so that you're still able to delete all of the work information without necessarily wiping somebody's phone of all of their personal contacts. And it's being able to have that technical distinction between the two, so that you're on the right side of the barrier. But it all, again, even that, it all comes down to trust, doesn't it? Because if I'm allowing you to remote wipe my phone, and if I've only got the one phone for personal and work, again, and monitoring wise, I want to make sure that the monitoring is restricted to the work-based monitoring and not to sort of my own completely separate social media, my own phone calls. It's otherwise your employee's just not going to trust you, and that's a massive problem.
Great conversation. It's good to see, there's some two sides to this at times, and so it's good to talk it out. Henrik put up a question here. It's all good to have mobile numbers of employees, but as the panel have talked about, these numbers come from HR systems, airline, GDS, etc. Most of these systems do not validate that the number is correct. How does the panel validate numbers? Well, I know, Rod, you're calling each traveler individually, and so you find out, I guess, on the fly whether that mobile number is accurate or not. Did you find any inaccuracy when you're calling folks?
There are rare occasions where they're inaccurate, or it's their girlfriend's phone or their boyfriend's phone or it's mom's phone, because when they were hired, they were still living at home. So yeah, there are anomalies in the system. I know from our emergency ISOS side of it, a lot of those numbers are not validated, and we have to go into the research and try to track things down. Something that came to mind in the conversation between Eric and Dr. Tim was the fact that there are some countries, you go to immigration and customs and your cell phone and your laptop goes behind the curtain and it's gone for 10 or 15 minutes, and then it comes back because the local government there, the country that you're entering, is scanning it for information. And as we know, there are nefarious countries that are trying to obtain proprietary information, whether it's your personal contacts, or if you have an engineer and you have a design in your computer that you're bringing to a factory or whatever the case may be. So some companies do, and I'll use the term throwdown phone, where it's wiped of a lot of numbers and information. So you can go to your IT or your technology department and get a clean phone before you go to one of these countries.
Yeah, that's critical. I know, especially working for a government contractor, assuring that you have an ITAR compliant mobile device that doesn't have data and proprietary information sitting on it. So that's a really great point, Rod. That's probably a whole nother webinar just on ITAR regulation and mobile devices, et cetera. Certainly. I think we have time just for what.
I was just going to add to that point. One of the great things about having visible traveler profiles, whether that's coming via Martha from like a HR feed in, is when the individuals can always see and have access to their own profile, then it's very easy for them to go in and update things like mobile phones if it's not being pushed by the updates to a daily feed from a HR system. So, I mean, so long as you're giving the individuals access to their own profile, they can see what information is in there and they can also maintain it and update it nice and easily.
Yeah, most apps also will ask you to authenticate your number by sending an SMS text, and then you have to click an email or respond to that text saying, yes, you got the message, and you opt in also, which is another nice comfort level for the user.
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric. There is that ability for validation up front where you have to get the SMS and then respond, yes, this was correct. That's a really great point on the validation. I think we have time for one last question here from Kevin. Would be interesting in hearing thoughts from the panel as well as other attendees and how their organization audit the inclusion and annual updating of mobile phone numbers into travel, HR, and TRM company profiles. Well, I think maybe perhaps we've kind of answered that in the last question as well. You know, again, to Eric's point, one way to validate is through upfront the SMS that just verifies that's the correct mobile number. And then to Rod's point about calling and trying to get folks to actually, assuring that the proper mobile number is in there. So anybody else have any final thoughts or conclusion before we wrap up here with the last 2 minutes?
I'd just like to make a comment, Andrew, on that last comment from the group. I agree. It's never going to be perfect. Nothing is ever 100%, but you hope the exceptions are small. We have to trust our employees that when we do this annual reminder to go into HR and go into your profiles and validate your information, you hope that they understand the reasons that we're asking for this information. And again, it comes down to the data is only as good as the people that put it in there. And again, it's appealing to the emotional piece of the puzzle where when you're traveling, somebody needs to be able to find you. Simple as that.
Exactly.
And I'll add on to that, Martha. It's also part of management's. It's not solely my job. It's not solely Martha's job or Eric's job to get the employee. It's also management's job. When they're doing their quarterly or annual reviews, this should be, hey, have you updated this? That should be one of the questions. So again, it's changing the culture and asking the right questions from the managerial standpoint.
Well, we're at the top of the hour here. I want to just say, again, thank you to our panelists today for participating, for all the attendees for joining us, and certainly for GRASP for helping sponsor this webinar today. I hope you all found really good value out of it, learned something about mobile numbers, the value, as well as how data privacy impacts mobile numbers, and some of the best practices to improve adoption of mobile numbers within your travel profiles. So thank you everyone for attending, and have a wonderful week. Thank you.